Yeah, I guess that's a good enough intro. I've never been at a loss on how to write a review as much as I have with this album. Granted, normally, if that were the case, I would just not write a review. It's not like I come out with them very often or anything. But as I have sat with this album over the last couple years, and as it has grown on me gradually more and more, I've found the need to talk about it more and more. So this review may be a bit more messy than the others, maybe a bit more directionless, as the overall point I'm trying to make is not really as cohesive in any way. But I guess I should just start it in the way I start most of these, with a little background on who exactly made the project. Jasper Marsalis, known under the name Slauson Malone, is a producer, multi-instrumentalist, and singer-songwriter probably most known for being a former member of hip-hop and neo-soul collective Standing on the Corner, which in themselves are known for multiple collabs, most notably with Earl Sweatshirt on some rap songs, though I don't think Slauson Malone was on that record himself. Along with this, Malone has also had his hands deep in the current wave of underground abstract hip-hop, collaborating with artists ranging from Pink Sifu to Danny Brown, notably making an appearance alongside Standing on the Corner on You Know What I'm Saying. He's built up a solid repertoire on his own as well, though, with a solid batch of EPs, mixtapes, and singles under his belt leading up to the release of A Quiet Farwell. And these are certainly worth checking out in their own right. I specifically recommend the mixtape 1 if you can manage to track it down. It's full of excellent beats that move by in a pretty brisk pace, along with enough interesting production choices that they add an extra layer of fun experimentation to an already somewhat abstract project. But that's pretty much it for who Slauson is, at least in terms of pre-Farwell stuff. Since then, he's released more singles, a fantastic EP that I might talk about some other day, and done a few interesting art exhibits, but that's neither here nor there, because what we're here to talk about right here, right now, is aesthetically, this album is difficult to describe. I'll try my best to give you an idea of what it's like without just jumbling together a bunch of genre labels, though it'll probably end up sounding that way regardless. A Quiet Farwell, full name A Quiet Farwell 2016 to 2018 Crater Speak, is vaguely an abstract hip-hop album, though it feels really wrong to call it that. While that is the sound it most consistently pulls from, it doesn't account for the influence from plunderphonics and sound collage. The many tracks consist of just samples manipulated in various ways. It also doesn't account for the singer-songwriter moments. What are I Can Make You Feel Freedom, Won't Bleed Me, and the message, if not soul-tinged, psychedelic R&B ballads. Hell, there are even a few field recording and spoken word moments across the record, because, why wouldn't there be? Many of the tracks feel like sketches, but not because they are unfinished. No, instead they feel so open and freely flowing, unconfined to what may be considered a more polished approach. It's because of this that I wouldn't blame you for getting lost in the album with as many left turns as there are on this thing. I mean, even the song names are somewhat illegible, but I'll get back to that more later. It's still somehow cohesive though, with Malone masterfully executing every beat switch, every sample flip, and every new genre infusion. It's an album that, despite its obvious influences, despite how scatterbrained it is, feels incredibly whole and unique to the artist who created it. That all being said, while I would usually take this point to transition into a track-by-track analysis, this album makes that a little more difficult. There are 20 songs on this barely 32-minute project, with many of them being hardly a minute long. Along with this, most tracks either flow into each other or contain multiple songs in and of themselves, so you can see why approaching it like I usually would is a bit problematic. So instead, let's focus on more than just that, more than just the individual tracks. Let's look at the themes, the artistic direction, touching on individual tracks on the way, sure, but mainly focusing on the messages Slauson Malone has expertly weaved throughout every part of the project. And I mean every part, everything down from the cover art and deeply referential song titles is important to evaluating this project. Thematically, it is a project obsessed with race, nostalgia, and resistance, so let's start from there.
Why'd you miss it?
The way this project communicates thoughts on race is extremely unique, beautiful, and thought-provoking. Well, I won't distill all its messages and hand-feed you everything it says, because for that you should just listen to the man who said it. I'll gladly go into how expertly and beautifully A Quiet Farwell communicates these ideas. Firstly, the sound palette itself is incredibly Afrocentric, with the majority, if not all samples coming from black artists. The production side of the project shows clear love to these musicians beyond just the use of their music too, often putting them in the spotlight over Slauson himself, and occasionally even the featured artist he's collaborating with. It's honestly kind of incredible how Malone is able to completely recontextualize these songs while simultaneously paying so much respect for their artistry, while also still managing to fit them into the project thematically. Their use gets deeper than that too, obviously. Throughout the project there are often sirens or screams that will play at the start of the song, which, according to Malone himself, represents the death of a black person at the hands of white fear. And surely enough, before the title of each of these songs is a date commemorating and mourning the death of a prominent black figure. It's in ways like this that Slauson Malone brings these very real, emotional, and thematic elements to the forefront of his project. He is able to represent his and others' pain just through his insane attention to detail and incredible artistry, without even necessarily speaking a word, because we haven't even gotten to the lyricism yet, which of course is also incredible. The writing on this project perfectly illustrates, underscores, and even initially sets up the themes of race and black power, even more upfront and obviously than what I've discussed. It's for this maybe kind of backwards reason that I won't spend as much time on this, because while it is incredible, I once again have to say that anything I could say on the matter is just better stated by paying attention to the project itself. That being said, there are plenty of lyrical highlights on the record, my favorites being moments like on Smile Number 4, that contrast the nostalgia for the past with the ongoing effects of colonialism and white supremacy. Or how about the flying Africans board the mothership Zong, which directly tackles the idea that the solution to the issues caused by white supremacy is to get away. No, it states, there's no other space, there's no other way. There are so many beautiful, poetic, and powerful lines on this project. Honestly, with everything I've researched about it and read about it, it's just all made me appreciate this so much more than I even did when I initially decided to make the video. Malone's thoughtful writing extends throughout the whole record, of course, and his thoughts on race often intertwine and bounce off his ideas regarding other subjects. Take his complicated relationship with the past and nostalgia, for example. Like he said in an interview with Passion of the Wise, he doesn't believe that the past, or at least how we usually think of it, exists. Instead, he says it's more of a tool we use to contextualize and cope with the present we're in. And that philosophy can certainly be heard throughout the record. Whether it be literal, like how the sound of nostalgic samples come together to reform and shape the sound of the project, lifting up the messages Malone is wanting to communicate, or how a lot of the writing on the album is dedicated to reframing and recontextualizing the past. Take the Smile tracks, a 4-part series of songs sprinkled throughout the track list. They fixate and reiterate on the phrase, "smile at the past when I see it," over and over, with each song adding a new feel and context to the simple phrase. On Smile 1, Slauson describes seeing how the past still exists today, warily repeating,
"Seen the days, come back and see. I seen the days."
On 2, rapper Maxo talks about moving on and growing up, despite growing up in a world that didn't want him to get older. The track once again opening up with a blaring siren. 3 seems to show a sort of distorted or manipulated version of the past, or of history for that matter. It features an increasingly downtrodden Malone, mumbling his way through the verse, heads hung, tongues tied, songs sung, souls sold, in what is one of the most haunting moments of the project for me. And finally there's Smile 4, the track that is the most blatantly about race out of all in the series, showing a bleak past giving way to a pessimistic future. It culminates in a truly euphoric moment, one where the instrumental builds as Malone admits that he
Can't smile at the past when I see it. Stay my past, that's it.
creating one of the most somber, memorable, and beautiful moments on the record. The Smile tracks, of course, are not the only place where Malone brings up these themes, but I find the repetition of the tracks and how Malone is able to reincorporate the same lyrics and melodies really intriguing. And while it may leave us in a bit of a bleak space, Malone makes sure to let us know that it's not all bad. There is still hope. As he says himself in a reference to the poet Fred Moten, there is such a place as nowhere, there is such a way as no way. Which ties everything, I guess, to the final point, the way Slauson Malone incorporates themes of resistance into his art and makes his art part of his resistance. This album, the stories behind it, the way it is structured it is brash, confident in itself, and the messages it puts forth are uncompromising. Black power is put directly in your face throughout everything the record does, in its production, songwriting, features, and confrontation of the past. It holds nothing back in letting you know the devastating effects of white colonialism and supremacy. And maybe what's the most powerful out of everything here, it refuses to take it. A Quiet Farwell boldly submits its point of view that blackness is here and is not going away, whether through blatant statements, take the poetry in Euchromia, for example, or the simple refusal to go anywhere, as we touched on in Flying Africans, but it's also present in tracks like I Can Make You Feel Free. There's a distinct refusal to lay down, a refusal to leave, and a refusal to let black suffering be up for consumption.
Smile at the past when I see it.
I don't want to give off the impression that all the extra stuff I've mentioned, the interviews, the external references, and the overall context is necessary to enjoy the album. Like I said, a lot of this I only came to find out during the research process of writing, after I made the decision to make the video in the first place. Instead, my goal of telling you all this is to reiterate one thing. Slauson Malone is amazing at making art. On A Quiet Farwell, he manages to make one of the most beautiful statements of black power I've heard, and showcases it through the lens of one of the most abstract albums I've heard. There are people who will hear the obscure and experimental structure and sound palette of the project and just be immediately turned off, and yeah, I won't deny that. Similarly, you may find yourself grasping for straws amid the sea of how much this record does. I wouldn't blame you for treating it like background noise amid the cacophony of it all. But for me, this is one of the most thrilling and interesting projects I've listened to. And so I wanted to talk about this album, not because it's underrated. No, it's certainly a critical darling by all respects, but instead I want to refocus discussion on it, look past the superficial avant-garde qualities of it, and view it as art. As beautiful, political, shocking, and empowering art. While the weirdest album you'll hear, or something like that, may be a good tagline to get people invested, I can't in good faith say that that's where my attraction to this lies. And I hope now you can see at least partly why that is. There's so much more to talk about, of course. There's the companion piece EP that I briefly mentioned at the start. There's many tracks that I just didn't touch on at all, even some of the most popular and poignant ones. And I never even mentioned the page numbers in the track names. That's just because I want you to check out this project for yourself. Come to your own understanding of it. It's a very personal, very thoughtful, and intentional album. And I want to see more people dig deeper into what it holds, because I feel like most discussion is pretty bare bones, all things considered. I hope I did a good job wrapping up all the many complicated topics in this video. It was a difficult process to write, but I think also a very needed one. Making this review kind of got me out of my comfort zone a bit when it comes to what I talk about and how I approach writing these as a whole. And I think, or at least I hope, I did a pretty good job. That's pretty much it for this video, by the way. I really appreciate you watching it, and if you listen to the project or otherwise and have something to say about the review, or just the album itself, please let me know. That's not comment bait, I just genuinely enjoy interacting with y'all about these videos. I love talking about the albums. So, let me know. Alright, that's it for realsies this time. See you later, take care. Yeah.
Nothing seems to work. Nothing seems to work. Nothing seems to work. Nothing seems to work. Nothing seems